They say some houses are haunted by spirits, but this house was alive, and the only thing it craved was you. This is the true story of the house that breathed, and if you feel something breathing behind you by the end of this tale, don't turn around. The first time Tony and Deborah Pickman stepped into the small white house on 508 North 2nd Street, it felt strangely alive. The air was heavy, not stale, as though it had recently exhaled. Deborah, 6 months pregnant at the time, brushed off the odd sensation and focused on the charm of the old Victorian home. But Tony paused near the doorway, sensing something he couldn't explain. It was like walking into someone else's lungs, thick with a presence that pulsed quietly in the background. Still, they moved in, unaware that they'd just invited themselves into a nightmare. Within days, the oddities began. Lights flickered even though the wiring was inspected just days earlier. The baby's toys would rearrange themselves overnight, always placed in neat circles. Cold spots formed in the nursery, colder than any draft could explain. Deborah thought it was her pregnancy hormones playing tricks, but Tony grew restless. At night, he'd hear whispers coming from the hallway, too faint to understand, but too real to ignore. Tony's nights turned into terrors. He'd wake up soaked in sweat, feeling as if someone was watching him from the bedroom doorway. Once he swore he saw a young girl in old-fashioned clothes standing at the edge of the bed. She vanished when he blinked. At first, he didn't tell Deborah, afraid it would stress her out. But when she started waking up with scratches on her arms, they could no longer stay silent. They called in a local psychic, hoping for answers. The woman barely stepped through the threshold before declaring, "There's something wrong here." Her face paled, her voice trembled. "A little girl died in this house," she whispered, "but her spirit, it's not what it seems." She claimed the girl's name was Sally, and she was angry, very angry. The psychic explained that Sally had died from a botched appendectomy in the house decades ago. She had been in agony, screaming, as the doctor, reportedly her own father, cut into her without anesthesia. The pain had twisted her spirit. The house had become her prison, and now anyone who entered paid the price. But as the psychic spoke, the temperature dropped nearly 10 degrees. A loud bang came from the nursery upstairs. When Tony rushed to check the nursery, the crib was flipped upside down. The baby's mobile spun violently, though no windows were open. Deborah screamed from downstairs, claiming she saw a shadow rush past her. They spent the night in a motel, but when they returned the next morning, things escalated. Pictures were torn from the walls, and Tony's arms were covered in fresh scratches, 3 long, deep cuts that burned like acid. Over the next few weeks, the scratches became daily. Sometimes they appeared right in front of Deborah's eyes, thin red lines crawling across Tony's back like invisible claws. Doors slammed shut on their own. The TV would turn on to static at exactly 3:33 a.m. The air always smelled faintly of iron and burnt sugar, and the whispers grew louder, sometimes mimicking their voices. Tony became obsessed with documenting the activity. He set up cameras, voice recorders, and infrared sensors. What he captured was beyond explanation. Disembodied voices whispering, "Get out!" A dark figure standing in the baby's crib, its face distorted and smeared like melting wax. And worst of all, the breathing, slow, deliberate, and raspy, right beside the camera when no one was there. Deborah wanted to leave, but Tony felt trapped. He said he couldn't abandon the house, not without understanding what it wanted. He claimed Sally wasn't just a ghost, she was something else pretending to be a child. His dreams turned into visions, burning hospitals, screaming children, blackened eyes. He'd wake up with blood on his hands but no injuries. Deborah feared he was losing his mind, or that something was taking it from him. A local priest agreed to bless the home. The moment he stepped inside, his cross snapped in half. During the blessing, the baby's nursery door slammed shut, locking them out. They heard a child scream from inside. When they finally broke the door open, the room was ice cold, and the name Sally was carved into the wall. The priest left abruptly and never returned their calls. Deborah began hearing her name whispered through the vents at night. It wasn't Tony's voice, nor anything human. Sometimes the whispers turned into guttural growls that shook the floor beneath the bed. The baby inside her kicked violently during those moments, as if reacting to the house's malevolence. She started sleeping in the car some nights, unable to bear the constant tension. Tony, on the other hand, grew more withdrawn, pale and haunted. One night, Tony carved a crude symbol into the floorboards of the basement. He couldn't explain why. He just felt like he had to. The moment he finished, all the lights in the house exploded at once. A low, vibrating hum filled the air, and black liquid began oozing from the vents. Deborah screamed for him to stop, but Tony stared blankly at the symbol, mumbling in a language he didn't recognize. It was as if Sally, or whatever it was, had taken over his body. Their friends and family stopped visiting. Everyone who entered the house claimed to feel dizzy or ill. One friend even fainted near the front door, waking up screaming about a girl with no eyes staring at him. Deborah's parents begged her to move out, but Tony refused. He said they were so close to understanding her. Deborah wasn't sure who he meant by her anymore. Their son was born a month early. The birth was difficult. Emergency C-section, blood loss, erratic heartbeats. When the baby finally came out, the power in the entire hospital flickered. Nurses claimed strange glitches with the monitors and cold bursts of air around the delivery room. Tony looked at his newborn son and whispered, "She's watching." Back home, the baby's crib would shake violently at night. Deborah heard lullabies being hummed over the baby monitor, off-key and slow, like a broken music box. Sometimes she'd find the baby moved to the floor, asleep and unharmed, with toys surrounding him in perfect circles. One night, she caught a glimpse of a shadowy hand pulling the blanket over the baby. When she rushed in, the room was empty. But on the wall, mine was scratched above the crib. Tony stopped working. He spent all day in the basement, surrounding himself with books on demons, ancient rituals, and possession. His skin grew pale and he developed dark bags under his eyes. Deborah would find him muttering to a doll he claimed was Sally's. He started drawing disturbing pictures, some of the baby on fire, others of Deborah with her mouth sewn shut. He wasn't Tony anymore. Desperate, Deborah reached out to a paranormal team from a nearby city. The group agreed to stay overnight and record any phenomena. The first hour was calm, too calm. But by midnight, the house came alive. Cameras malfunctioned. One team member was thrown against the wall, her shoulder dislocated. During the investigation, the team captured a terrifying EVP. When they asked, "Who are you?" the voice replied, "Mother gave me pain. Now I give it back." In another recording, the spirit mocked them in a child's voice, saying, "Want to play forever?" A photograph taken in the hallway showed a small girl in a hospital gown, her face twisted and bloody. But no one saw her in person. The team packed up and left before sunrise, refusing to ever return. Tony began sleepwalking, often waking up in the nursery with no memory of how he got there. He started speaking in different voices, sometimes childlike, sometimes demonic. Deborah recorded one episode where Tony's voice said, "She lives in your blood now." The next morning, their baby had deep bruises on his arms that looked like fingerprints. That was the final straw. Deborah left, taking the baby and checking into a women's shelter. Tony stayed behind, insisting the house had answers. He began uploading videos to the internet, disturbing footage of himself screaming at shadows, speaking in Latin, and begging Sally to show herself. The final video he uploaded was just static and breathing. No one has heard from him since. When police entered the house days later, it was empty. But the word "welcome" was carved into the walls, in blood. Deborah never returned to the house. She changed her name and moved states, fearing whatever was inside would follow. For a while, life was calm again, but then her son started speaking to someone who wasn't there. He called her Sally. He said she visits him in his dreams. The boy started drawing pictures of the house, detailed, eerie, as if he remembered every corner. He drew figures with hollow eyes and stitched mouths. One drawing showed the family at the dinner table, except a shadowy girl sat at the head. He said she told him stories, and sometimes they weren't scary. But other times, she screamed in his ear. Deborah burned the pictures, but new ones kept appearing under his pillow. Doctors dismissed it as trauma or an overactive imagination, but no one could explain how the boy knew Latin phrases or surgical terms he had never heard before. He once woke up choking, as if being strangled by invisible hands. A camera placed in his room captured a dark figure leaning over his bed. but it disappeared the moment the lights came on. Deborah felt her sanity unraveling. She feared her son had been marked. Years later, a documentary crew returned to the house for a TV special. They lasted less than 48 hours. One cameraman vanished for 3 hours, later found in the attic curled up in a fetal position, unresponsive. The host claimed she saw her dead sister inside a mirror. Their final footage was unreleased, locked away due to disturbing content. But a leaked clip surfaced online. A scream, then static, then a child's laugh. The house remained standing, empty, quiet. But every now and then, neighbors claimed to hear footsteps at night, laughter, and the sound of something breathing. The breathing became the house's signature, deep, labored, and rhythmic, as if the very walls were lungs. Paranormal researchers who braved short visits described feeling watched from every angle. Some claimed the house knew their thoughts, whispering secrets no one else should know. One man ran out screaming, claiming he saw his own dead body lying in the kitchen. Another never spoke again after his visit, only drawing circles with crosses inside. Locals began warning tourists to stay away. They spoke of blackouts in the neighborhood that happened only when someone entered the house. Children walking past said they felt hands reach out from the windows. One girl went missing after daring her friends she'd knock on the front door at midnight. Her body was never found, but her shoe turned up on the front porch, soaking wet and covered in small, muddy fingerprints. Police couldn't explain the muddy trail that led back into the locked house. The town tried sealing the house off. Padlocks were broken the next day. Security cameras set up around the property were destroyed or went dead without explanation. One guard who patrolled the block was later committed to a psychiatric facility. He'd claimed he kept seeing a girl on fire inside the windows, smiling at him. His last journal entry simply read, "It's not a little girl." It never was. Urban explorers filmed a walkthrough for their YouTube channel. At first, everything was normal. Dusty, creaky, abandoned. But within 10 minutes, their flashlight began to flicker. One camera caught a handprint forming on the wall as they passed it. And in one frame, a pale girl stood in the hallway, her mouth gaping open like it had been torn wider than humanly possible. Viewers of the video reported strange things: headaches, nosebleeds. One person said their lights flickered while watching, and their dog wouldn't stop barking at the screen. A few even claimed to see the girl behind them in the reflection of their monitor. The video was removed after dozens of users reported seizures and night terrors. Still, pirated versions float around the internet like cursed relics. One paranormal podcaster visited the house in secret. He brought a Bible, holy water, and 2 friends. The recording never aired, but raw audio leaked months later. It began with jokes and laughter. It ended with screaming, banging, and the unmistakable sound of a child whispering, "You'll stay here too." Authorities tried razing the house, but every attempt to demolish it failed. Equipment malfunctioned, workers refused to continue, and one foreman died mysteriously the night before the scheduled demolition. He was found in his truck, eyes wide open, frozen in terror. The only clue was the word liar scratched into the fogged windshield. After that, no one tried again. The house was left to rot, but it never did. It stayed as pristine as the day the Pickmans moved in, dustless, untouched by time, as if something inside was preserving it, waiting for someone to come back. The locals now say it feeds on attention, and every story told keeps it alive. Strangers still leave offerings on the porch: dolls, candy, candles. Some claim they hear soft giggles if they leave the right toy. Others report nightmares for weeks. The offerings rot overnight, but the toys are always gone, taken, like the house collects pieces of you in return. Deborah's son, now 17, rarely speaks. He draws constantly, always the same things: the house, the girl, a shadow with no face. Sometimes he speaks in a different voice, one that sounds like a much younger child. When asked about Sally, he says, "She's still inside me." Deborah took him to a therapist. The doctor claimed dissociative identity disorder. Until the lights flickered in her office, until the boy recited her home address and said her cat would die that night. It did. She refused to treat him again. Deborah doesn't ask about Sally anymore. A former priest returned to confront the entity. He had helped bless the house in the early 90s before fleeing. He said he could no longer live with the guilt of leaving that family behind. Armed with relics, he entered alone. The neighbors reported chanting, then silence. When they found him, he had carved a cross into his chest with his bare hands. He never regained consciousness, but his heart monitor beeped in a pattern that formed Morse code. The message read, "She is Legion. She is not alone." Every time a priest enters that house, the same fate occurs. It doesn't repel faith, it consumes it, like a child crushing ants out of curiosity. Deborah once attempted to burn the doll Tony had claimed was Sally's, but it wouldn't ignite. Even gasoline failed to catch. That night, her bedroom was filled with smoke, but nothing had burned. Her son stood at the doorway, eyes rolled back, whispering, "She doesn't like that." Deborah never tried again. Some believe Sally was never a little girl at all, that she's a facade, a mask for something ancient, something that mimics innocence to draw in the curious. The more people visit, the stronger she becomes. Her story has outgrown the house. Now it lives in whispers, in images, in every retelling. One paranormal expert warned that merely learning about the house creates a tether. The more you read, watch, or think of it, the more real it becomes to you. People have reported seeing her after watching documentaries or hearing stories. A girl in white at the end of the bed, a whisper in the vents, a breath down the neck when no one else is home. Tony Pickman was never found. His last recorded location was in the basement, face lit by a single candle. In the footage, he whispers, "I know who she really is." Then his face contorts into something inhuman. He screams once. The camera falls to the floor and cuts out. Deborah believes he was consumed, body, mind, and soul. She doesn't speak publicly anymore. But in a rare interview, she said, "It wasn't just a haunting, it was an infection, an evil that spreads, feeds, and learns." "You don't leave that house," she whispered. "It leaves with you." A college student studying urban legends visited the house as part of her thesis. She spent 1 hour inside, streaming live to her small audience. Her footage was disjointed, glitches, whispers, and flickers of a pale figure just out of frame. Near the end, she stared directly into the camera and said, "She's inside me now." The stream ended abruptly, and she was never seen again. Police found only her camera, still warm, still recording the sound of slow breathing. Her apartment was searched. The walls were covered in drawings, hundreds of them, of a house with no doors and windows. Each drawing had the same child's figure standing at the top of a staircase, smiling. Her roommate claimed she'd been sleep-talking for weeks, mumbling things like, "She's underneath the floor, and the house has teeth." The roommate moved out and never spoke of her again. Some say the girl never really left the house. She just walked into another one. Years later, one of the original documentary crew returned with a priest. They believed they had uncovered the truth. Sally was the daughter of a failed surgical experiment in the 1800s, buried alive in the foundation. Her screams were heard for days after construction, but no one dug her up. The house was built over her tomb, and her rage never stopped growing. The priest tried to bless the land, but his holy water boiled before it touched the soil. The crew member dropped out of contact 2 days later. His last voicemail simply said, "She forgave me," then static, then a long, inhuman screech. The priest was found wandering the woods, barefoot, clothes torn, muttering about bones in the walls. He could only say, "She's not the only one. The whole house is full." The town unofficially declared the house off limits. No trespassing signs, police patrols. Still, thrill seekers and ghost hunters kept coming. One group live streamed from the attic and asked, "If you're here, knock twice." There were 3 knocks, and then someone behind the camera said, "She's right behind you." One viewer of that stream went blind moments after watching it. Another suffered a seizure. A third began coughing up blood and claimed, "It's in the air." Authorities labeled it a hoax, but internet forums whispered otherwise, that some houses don't haunt you, they infect you. Deborah, now much older, has tried to warn people. She writes anonymous blog posts, leaves cryptic voicemails on paranormal podcasts, and even mailed her son's last drawing to a priest. No one listens. She once said, "You think it's just a story? But stories are her favorite food. The more people know her name, the more power she gains. A researcher traced dozens of reported hauntings to people who had watched or read about Sally. The pattern was undeniable. Those who learned her name often vanished, suffered mental breakdowns, or began reporting mirrors fogging up with handprints. The researcher disappeared on Halloween night. His house was found locked from the inside, candles burned to stubs, and the word "tell" written over every wall. Creepiest of all were the cassette tapes he left behind. Each contained a lullaby hummed in different voices, some male, some female, some impossibly deep or unnaturally high. But every tape ended with a child whispering, "Shh, don't wake the house." The local power company eventually cut off electricity to the neighborhood. They claimed it was due to strange surges, blackouts, and meter readings that made no sense. The house still glowed faintly at night, a soft golden hue as if candlelight pulsed from within. No one lit those candles, and yet they were always burning. People now call it the breathing house instead of Sally's, as if admitting the house itself is alive. Some say the boards shift like ribs, that the chimney exhales in fog even in summer, and sometimes the front door opens, not when someone knocks, but when it wants someone to come in. The wind carries the softest, most horrifying phrase, "You're just in time for playtime." A drone was flown inside once, controlled from a mile away. The footage was jagged, flickering. It captured blood smears on the walls, spelling out a nursery rhyme in reverse. A child's bedroom sat untouched, as if time stopped. But then, a face filled the lens. A girl with black pits for eyes and too wide smile. The drone dropped. The feed cut. The operator died in his sleep that night. A young psychic claimed she could cleanse the home. She entered confidently, surrounded by cameras. 5 minutes in, her expression changed. She looked terrified, then calm. She sat down in the center of the living room and never moved again. When her team found her, she was catatonic, eyes wide open. She hadn't blinked for hours. The only word she repeated, "Mother." That's the name Sally called herself now. Not a ghost, not a demon. Mother. As if she had birthed something bigger. Some believe every person who enters becomes part of the house. Their screams, their breath, their memories embedded into the walls. You don't just die inside, you're absorbed. A podcast played a bootleg EVP recording during a Halloween special. The host joked it was fake, but during the live broadcast, his co-host passed out, convulsing. The lights blew out. Listeners reported hearing whispers over their headphones. The show was never aired again. The host quit media and refused to speak of what happened. A funeral home down the block shut down after reporting strange cold spots and smells of rotting flesh. Embalmed bodies moved on their own. Cameras caught coffins shaking. And once, an entire row of corpses sat up in unison at 3:07 a.m. One mortician fled and later confessed she's bringing them with her. The land itself is sick. Grass doesn't grow. Birds avoid flying over. GPS systems malfunction near the block. One delivery driver refused to take a package there and quit his job on the spot. He claimed the package whispered to him, "Take me home." Deborah moved again, far away, but she says her son still visits her in dreams. He never speaks, just stands by the window, staring at the street. And she hears it then too, that horrible, wet, gurgling breath, as if the house is still inside him, or her. Every October, more people go missing near that block. Some say it's curiosity, others say it's calling them, drawing in new stories, new pain, new voices to echo in the walls. The house doesn't want to be forgotten, it wants to be remembered. And now you've read about her, you've pictured the hallway, the girl, the doll. Maybe you even heard a sound just now. Maybe your screen flickered. Maybe you felt something behind you. That's how it starts. The most terrifying thing about the house isn't the breathing, it's the silence that follows it. A silence so heavy it presses on your chest like something is watching from inside the walls, waiting for you to notice it. Survivors all say the same thing. It knows when you're afraid. It drinks your fear like oxygen. And once you acknowledge it, it never lets go. A team of skeptics once entered to debunk the myth. Scientists, technicians, psychologists. They called it an experiment in collective delusion. But within an hour, their instruments failed. Temperatures dropped to sub-zero withaut explanation, and one member disappeared into the basement, never to be found. Her scream echoed for days, only in their dreams. Those who left were not the same. One tore out his eyes, claiming, "She kept showing me things." Another scribbled endlessly in notebooks, filled with ancient symbols no one could translate. One sat in a corner for the rest of his life, whispering, "The house isn't real, but I am." They became proof that something far worse than ghosts dwelled there. Something intelligent, something ancient. Deborah received a letter one year, no return address. Inside was a photograph of her son, standing in the living room of the house. But he hadn't aged a day. His eyes were completely black. On the back of the photo were 2 words written in crayon, "Stay forever." That was the last straw. Deborah disappeared the next week, leaving behind nothing but her rosary and a burnt photo album. The neighborhood fell into decline. Houses abandoned, roads cracked, trees died. People claimed the air itself felt thicker near the house, like walking through syrup. A school bus once stalled outside the property. Every child on board screamed at once. None could say why, but every single one drew the same picture afterward: a staircase, a doll, and eyes watching from the ceiling. Some say the house is spreading, that other homes near it are now breathing too. Doors opening on their own, sinks running red, cribs rocking themselves, and shadows standing at the foot of beds. These homes aren't haunted, they're infected, just like people. A software engineer created an AI to analyze the house's blueprints. He hoped to generate a 3D model to explore it virtually. But halfway through the render, the AI crashed, displaying only one phrase: "Why did you bring me back?" The engineer's house burned down that same night. Investigators found small, soot-covered handprints all over his walls. The breathing house doesn't want to be destroyed. It wants to expand. Every video, every story, every whisper, it feeds on belief. The more people fear it, the more it grows. And now it's not just a place, it's an idea, a viral entity. Some have theorized that Sally is only one of many forms. A lure, a mask, a childlike parasite crafted to gain sympathy before revealing the rot beneath. Other names appear in records around the world: Maya, Clara, Sophie, all tied to houses with the same symptoms. Each one eventually sealed off, then forgotten, until someone tells the story again. People claim even thinking about the house draws it nearer. That if you dream of a long staircase and a girl humming, it's too late. Your mind is the door now, and once it's open, it never truly closes. Something slips through, and you'll never be alone again. The most disturbing reports are of those who see the house where it shouldn't be. In a field, in the woods, in their rear-view mirror, always intact, always glowing faintly, and always breathing. Some walk toward it, unable to resist, none return. There's one man, a former firefighter, who entered after losing his daughter. He said if she was inside, he would bring her back. Neighbors watched him walk up the porch and vanish. The door never opened. He simply disappeared. That night, every fire alarm in town went off simultaneously. Inside the house, they say time bends. Minutes feel like days. People forget their own names. One man aged 50 years in 5 minutes. His hair turned white, his teeth fell out, and he cried like a baby. He kept repeating, "The walls remember everything. Everything you regret." And then he laughed until his heart stopped. Every October, the breathing gets louder, louder than before, almost rhythmic, like a heartbeat. Paranormal experts believe it's hibernating through the year, feeding quietly on memories and attention. But when the veil is thinnest in fall, it wakes, and it wants. The local government erased the house from official records. Maps no longer list the street. Satellite imagery blurs it out, but it's still there, always there. The house you can't find unless you're meant to. A journalist investigating the tale vanished after claiming he'd located the original architectural blueprints. He told friends, "The basement goes deeper than anyone thought. It's not a basement, it's a burial ground." His last message said, "It's alive. The blueprints are veins." Then silence. Now people all over the world report hearing the breathing. In attics, in closets, beneath floorboards, even in apartment buildings. It begins softly, barely audible. But once you notice it, it follows, and it waits for you to fall asleep. The girl, if you see her, is always smiling, but her eyes tell the truth. They're hollow, endless. Behind them is something wrong, something broken, something old. And if she reaches out to touch you, don't move. Don't scream. It loves screaming. This story is no longer confined to that house. It's in your mind now. It's been breathing with you since you started reading. Do you hear it now? That soft, slow inhale? That cold chill behind your spine? That's not your imagination, because once you know about her, once you've pictured her face, her house, her voice, you're no longer a stranger. You're next. So if you hear breathing tonight, if something knocks without touching the door, don't answer. Don't speak. And for the love of everything, don't smile back. So now you've heard the story. You've breathed in the air she lingers in. Maybe your lights flicker. Or maybe, just maybe, you're already part of her house now. Don't smile back. Don't look at the stairs. And whatever you do, don't open the door.